Today's episode is brought to you by Bones Coffee Company. You can forget about boring coffee when you drink Bones Coffee. Not only do they offer a variety of flavors such as strawberry cheesecake and maple bacon, they are a family-owned company that puts great detail not only in their coffee, but in the artwork that comes on each individual bag. Bones Coffee has a coffee club that will deliver your favorite coffee to your door every month. If that wasn't enough, they also have some amazing swag to offer. Check out Bones Coffee Company today. I'll have my affiliate links in the show notes for you. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Chasing Justice. I am your host, Synova Cantrell. Today I have Hootie Russo with me, the wonderful Ex-Gambino crime family associate. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Synova. How are you? Thank you for having me again.
We enjoy having your opinion on these things, and this is one of those cases that's rather disturbing, and it would be interesting to have your opinion on how you think this happened and how you think what maybe could have been done better by law enforcement and that sort of thing. So today we'll jump right in. The lady's name that we're talking about is Angie Hammond out of Clinton, Missouri. Now, Clinton, Missouri is a very small rural town based around farms and a couple factories. So at the time, I believe there was only 6,000 or 8,000 people in the entire area. So it was very small town America, very rural, seemed like a safe place. And so this is back in 1991 is when this lady was kidnapped. So we also need to bring, let our audience know that this is before the days where most people didn't have cell phones. And it was common practice for teenagers in this town to drive around the square all hours of the night. That was kind of their local hangout. There wasn't a lot of attractions and things to do in the town, so that was what you did. You drove, you found your buddies, you got in your car, you turned on your radio, and you cruised the square. And so this is something that I've had several people, when I wrote the blog post about this, they're like, why did she do this and why did she do that? And I'm like, well, this is another time frame that I lived through, and I know Hootie lived through this time frame back before social media was everybody's life, and back before everyone had a cell phone. So this is the time frame that we are putting ourselves in. Now, we're talking about Angela Hammond. Angela Hammond was 20 years old when she disappeared. That means she would have been 50 years old as of February. This past February, she would have turned 50. Her child would have turned, I believe, 28 now, or 26, somewhere around in there. So
no, right? Because she was pregnant at the time. I was looking at that. So I'm thinking about it now. The child would have been around 30, 29, going on 30.
Yeah. So she was 4 months pregnant when she disappeared, and so that's the kind of the setting we've placed ourselves in. Now, Angie Hammond was 20 years old. She was going to a local university. She was dating a younger man. It was the high school football star, basketball and that sort of things. He was kind of the sports guy. Everybody in town loved them both. They were very popular, very outgoing. We're not talking about some recluse type people. We're talking about people that everyone knew and loved. And Rob Schaefer was her boyfriend. Now, a few months before this happened, on April 4th, in 1991, they were planning on, but they both had their plans. She was going to go off and do things, and he was going to go to the military. But they met each other. It was a whirlwind romance, and they fell for each other. And 4 months before this, she found out she was pregnant, and Rob proposed, and they bought this little house outside of town. It was a little trailer house for rent. It was nothing major, but it was a beginning. And those of you that may have gotten married young like I did, you know how those beginnings are. They're very naive, and everything in the world's beautiful and perfect, and so this is the way this couple looked at life. They had their plans. Baby was coming along. The first thing people want to say was, well, maybe he didn't want a baby, maybe this was what the problem was, but you'll find out later that Rob Rob had nothing to do with this, and you'll find out how the police eliminated him and everything. But he was gung ho. They were going to get married as soon as he graduated. This was April, so we're talking within 6 weeks he's going to be graduated from high school, and they were going to get married, and he was still going to do his military things, and they were just going to, rearrange their life a little bit. So the plan was the two of them had just moved into this little place, and they lived there, but they didn't have a phone. They hadn't put in a landline house phone. Most people probably don't even know what that is anymore. They didn't put in a phone yet. So I mean, they just got into this place, and they had plans to go to a family barbecue. They attended together, and then Rob had told his parents that, yes, I will come back home and babysit my younger brother while you guys go have a date night or whatever it was they were going to do. So at 10 o'clock, Rob and Angie go back to Rob's parents' house, and she drops Rob off. And the plan was they were only going to be gone for a couple hours, and then Angie was going to come back, pick up Rob, and they were going to go out, have a night on the town. Well, at 11:45, she had been hanging out with some girls, and they had driven around the square and whatnot and just wasted some time, basically. And it was a quarter till, let's see, I have the exact time. 11:23 p.m. is the exact time. I apologize, I didn't have my phone on silent. 11:23, she calls Rob. Now, neither one of them have a cell phone, so she goes to one of the local payphones. Now, they're running around the square with the groups of teenagers, and there's 2 or 3 different stops around that square that have those old payphones. And she stopped in the grocery store parking lot to call Rob. Now, this, I think they tracked, they clocked it or measured it or whatever, and it was about 7 blocks from his actual house where his parents are and where Rob was. Okay, so it wasn't very far away, and a lot of people wonder why she didn't just drive onto Rob's house. I don't know the reasoning for that. I do know she had the habit of using payphones, and that was common practice for her. So this wasn't out of her character, but she stopped there to talk to her fiance. And you have to remember, she's 4 months pregnant, so she's right in the middle of all those morning sickness things. And she told Rob that she didn't really feel like going out with him after he got done watching his brother. So she's like, if it's all right, I'm just going to go home. And at a certain time, I will come pick you up, or they can bring you home. I'm just going to go home, take a bath, and go to bed. I'm just too tired. Okay. So that was the plan. They sat there and chit chatted, but then something happened that changed the whole conversation. While she's talking on the phone to Rob, she notices a strange truck circling the square. And I say strange truck, and this may sound funny to someone like you, because I know you're in the city, so you don't know every vehicle that goes by. But when you live in a little bitty town, they know everybody. Everybody knows everybody. Everyone's in everyone's business. Everyone knows the gossip. It's there.
Too often, but in Cosa Nostra, if we're hanging out in front of the social club, we know every single car in that area.
Yeah.
If a car does, because we always got to pay attention to.
Right. It could be an enemy's car, right?
Enemy. We always, the wheels, the tires, the rims, the tint on the windows. There's certain things that you look for that, and then there's also certain things that you look for the Jakes, the FBI. We make sure. So yes, even though we're big city boys, things like that stick out. Cars, motorcycles. They've done a lot of hits on motorcycles. So that would be one thing we have in common with these small towns.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing I've noticed with you. There's a lot of things a lot of stereotypes you think of, city versus small town versus country, whatever, and they're really not that big of a difference, when it comes to those things. But you're right, it's something that it could be your survival in the life that you were in before. So you literally had to pay attention. That's one thing Sydney always griped at me. He's like, you need to pay better attention to your surroundings. And I said, why? I've always got you here. I've always got the guys. I said, I travel with an entourage. I don't go anywhere by myself. Why do I have to watch my surroundings?
They taught me that. They taught me that in elementary school. Always keep your head on a swivel, kid, no matter where you are.
Yeah. So anyway, she was paying attention, and she's like, this is a truck I'm not used to. She said it was an early 60s 70s model, older truck, and she thought it was a Ford. It was a real pale green, one of those with the real pale green and the white top. And she says it circled around the square several times. Now by this time it's almost midnight. Some of the younger teenagers have a curfew, so they're gone back home. So the square is starting to get a little bit quieter than it was, but there were other people out that did see this truck. Now, he asked her to describe it to him. He's like, well, who is it? Maybe it's just somebody that's lost or whatever. Well, she really starts to get scared when the truck pulls in a couple spaces down from her car. This guy gets out, and he's real scruffy. He's wearing a dirty white shirt and coveralls, like the jean coverall things. And he's got a dirty old ball cap on. And she said the main thing that he remembered her saying was he just seemed filthy. And
so she's reiterating this to her fiance over the phone while this man is circling her.
Because she's nervous. And then when he gets out of the truck, he comes and there's another phone. Back when this was the main way to talk to people, there wasn't just one phone there. There was a whole, string of phones. So he picks up the phone next to her. He puts it to his ear. He puts it right back down, and he walks away. And she's like, this guy's scaring me. Well, in my situation, in my case, my first thing is, okay, are you armed? Why are you there by yourself? If once that guy's scaring you, why aren't you getting back to your car? Why don't you stay on the phone till Rock calls? But these are things the way I was raised. This isn't the way she was raised. This was supposed to be a safe place for her. And this was back before all the true crime shows were on TV and everyone knew what to do. So she's just scared. He says, well, maybe he's just waiting around, and he's waiting for you to get off the phone. Maybe there's something wrong with that phone, and he's just waiting. So he actually hears her turn around to the man and say, are you waiting on this phone? And he says, no. And then she gets really scared. And before she can say anything else, he hears her scream, and he hears the phone disconnect. So what does this teenage boy do? He drops the phone. He doesn't hang it up. He flies out the door, gets in his vehicle, and he tears down the highway towards where he knows she is. Now, he's almost there. He's halfway there, and the truck passes him, and he sees her in the truck fighting with the driver. The guy's swerving on the road, and then he hears her yell, Robbie, as she comes past. She leans across him and yells out his window, Robbie. Now, this is where adrenaline kicks in, and sometimes you don't think straight. Well, he jumps and he drops his vehicle into reverse instantly. He doesn't shift it down. He just throws it in reverse, tears around and makes a U-turn in the highway and starts chasing the guy. The problem is he tore his transmission out of the vehicle that he was driving, and he only makes it a couple miles down the road at this high rate of speed trying to chase this guy. He ends up leaving his car, his vehicle, whatever he was driving, literally ends up dying in the middle of the road. It won't go anywhere. And he literally has to watch this man steal his fiance, and he can't do anything about it. Now, he flies out of the car. He starts to think he's going to trace him down. He's like, I can't catch him on foot. And a car drives by. He stops it, and he does the next thing that he thinks of. I got to go to the police station. So he goes to the police station, and they have him checking in at 5 minutes after midnight, and he relays this whole story. Now, to me, I find it heart-wrenching for this man because he's so close to saving her.
Wait. They didn't send a patrol car out right away?
He didn't have any way of calling.
No, when he got to the precinct, they didn't jump in the car and follow the route?
Yes, one cop stayed behind to take his statement, and then they got the information and they sent out what they had. But you're talking very small place, so they may have only had 2 cops on the payroll.
Right.
You know what I mean? They weren't. It wasn't New York where they could just flash flood the area with law enforcement. So he gets to the police. They take the statement. They're running out there. They're doing what they can, and the first thing they do, and this is something you and I have talked about, why didn't they look at Rob first? Because in several of the cases we've talked about, it's like they never look at the spouse, like is usually standard procedure. Well, they do look at Rob. And they bring Rob in for questioning many times. His story's always the same. He's always legit. And the fact that they drive out, he takes them out there. They drive out, they find his disabled vehicle right in the middle of the road, and exactly what's wrong with it, they found. So they pretty much rule him out pretty quickly. But he says the truck itself, there was some damage to the left front side of the vehicle, and then he says across the back is a very strange mural type thing. It was one of those screens that goes across the back, and it showed water like a stream and a fish jumping out of it. So they thought that this would be a real easy case where they could, track down this vehicle really quickly. And unfortunately, they never have found it. There were 1,600 vehicles that could have matched that description if it was a Ford. They went ahead and matched in case it was a Chevy, and it more than doubled that. And they ran down every lead they could find, and they never did find the truck. And so, what's your opinion? I'm going to stop talking for a second.
Well, the one thing I thought of when I was reading this during the week was license plate. Now, if the man didn't have any license plates on to begin with, why wasn't this truck flagged in a one-horse town?
Right.
Why were there so many payphones in a one-horse town? I've been to these towns back then, and I had needed to use a payphone because I was meeting somebody on business, and my beeper was out of service. That's how far back we're going, in the 90s now.
Yeah.
And I was like I said, I was in a one-horse town, and I had to go to like the local diner, and the payphone was in there. And I understand the whole thing about the square. And then what's not also adding up is if someone had to be sitting on her. So this truck had to be around days before. No one's come forward. And in them towns, everybody talks. The mailman knows every single resident in a town like that. Yep. Everybody that lives in the household, every car that drives down Main Street, America, everybody's name in every store. You're talking about the guy in the hardware store knows the 6,000 people in this town by their first name. Somebody has a baby, the whole town celebrates. This is the type of place that is, this is where they grew up. Now, did she start the night with her friend? Because where did the friend go?
The friend ended up going home because the plan was for Angie to meet back up with Rob. And the plan was for her to finish the evening with him. But she had changed her mind because she was tired and decided to go home. Now, Rob was able to give a partial license plate when he gave his description to police. He said that it was a really old beat up vehicle, and he said that even the license plate was real dirty and partially rusted, but he said he did find an X and a Y. It was XY and then something else, but that was all the license plate that he could make out in his adrenaline fueled haste. Now there's a few theories that have come around since then. There were some people say that perhaps Angie's ex-boyfriend was upset that she was marrying Rob. She had a tendency to date younger men because this man's name was Bill Barker, and he was 17 at the time. And so they had dated before, and I guess this was a recent breakup before she met Rob, and then they fell for each other and everything. But they went ahead and as far as I know, they've eliminated him as well because he wasn't in the proximity of this, this ordeal. Now, strangely, they have tried to link this to several other cases, thinking that maybe Angie wasn't the only one. Now, I'm going to, if you hear me swishing through things, it's because I actually wrote about this case in one of my older books. Okay, there are 3 different cases that this actually was linked to. And each case, one single woman was kidnapped. They all relatively looked similar. They were all taken, but the other 2 cases, the body was eventually found. So this is the difference between these 2. Now, each one of these cases are about 70 miles apart. If you drew a triangle on the map, the one with Angie Hammond in Clinton would be the top, and then about 70 miles in a triangle pattern. There are these other 2 cases, and each one of these cases happened relatively close to the same time. Now, the only problem is they couldn't find any links to them. So let me pull up her name.
Now, what comes to my attention is back then, he's driving a vehicle like that. That means he doesn't have much money because it's a very noticeable vehicle. You don't want rust on your plate because you don't want the cops pulling you over because anything blocking or in the eye of the law that they can't read an obstruction, which is blocking of a registration, of an inspection or a license plate, you will get pulled over. This man didn't care about that. So therefore, he must not have money. Now, she's a pregnant woman. She has to give birth. That means there has to be other people involved. Now, I go to cult route with this situation. She's a young girl. You know how it is in these small towns, unwed, pregnant. A lot of religious activists out there are against that. One of these crazy cult, left over from the 70s and the early 80s. I was thinking more towards that because now, how far were they from Canada? How long would it have taken them to get out of country? Because you're familiar with that area, right?
Yeah, it would have taken them a while, unless they found a way to fly out, because we're right in the heartland and there aren't any. I mean, there's interstate everywhere, but there's no easy access to get straight to Canada from here. You have to work your way there.
There's a lot of moving pieces that don't connect in the positive way of a puzzle.
Right.
I don't like it at all. To be honest with you, reading this, I was actually giving myself a stomachache, to be honest with you, because you listen to these stories about these small towns. This specific situation, and I looked this up, really has never happened before, where a young pregnant mother was ripped away from a 6,000 population town and a body or a new baby being born was never reported. No one talked about this vehicle, seeing it 2 days before. It had to be sitting on her. You just don't come up, and you know better than I do, these crazy people, a pregnant woman's more trouble than kidnapping a regular person. They got to come up with the right vitamins. They got to give her the right care. She's only just halfway through her pregnancy. It's like what? The beginning of the end of this first trimester, beginning of the second trimester. So there's a lot of work that goes in with this. And a guy walking around looking the way that man was described don't look like the type of man that would be able to take care of a pregnant woman chained up in a basement.
No. Now you say that, and we're going to go back into that. So make sure I get back to that content idea of him sitting on her before we get done with this, because there's some new information that's come out in the last year or so on this case that kind of proves that theory. So we'll go into that. I found the people's names. The first woman was Trudy Darby. She was from Max Creek. Darby worked at the local convenience store, and on January 19th, so we're talking 4 months, well, 3.5 months. So just over 90 days before this, she was robbed, kidnapped, and murdered, but her body was found 2 days later. Okay. That's another small town. Yeah, small town. She was at a gas station. So to me, that would be an extremely far stretch because the MO is not the same. He's not casing this woman. He's not, kidnapping her and
Pattern is
never
different.
find her.
Whenever pattern is off, we got to throw that out the window.
Yeah. So to me, I don't think Trudy Darby has anything to do with it. The next woman was Cheryl Kennedy, and she was kidnapped by a couple of men who were basically psychotic killers, and they tag teamed. They would find someone and they would kill them, and that was their pleasure.
No,
And
that's more
they found they found her body.
sadistic serial killers.
Yeah, they're not, they found them, and so this
And
was
these
another one
aren't
of those
people who
things.
look for pregnant. These aren't the type of killers that look for pregnant women. It's too much
Yeah.
of a hassle for them.
So so then they go and they try to link her to a man that came up on America's Most Wanted in April of '92. So a year later, they try to link her to this man named McDuff. Now, before we get into McDuff, I'm going to, I guess I'll just hold it up because I don't have it prepared. At the beginning, I'm going to show you this really crude police sketch. You see it? Okay. This was supposed to be the sketch that they came up with after Rob gave his statement. This was supposed to be going off of his and her descriptions. The only problem is, you notice the main difference is when she describes the man, he has a white, ashy beard and mustache. Now, I don't know if that was fake and this came off in in the struggle, because she was fighting him hard enough in the truck that he was swerving all over the road. So it could have came off. Nobody really knows why. This police sketch doesn't show the facial hair that she tells Rob about. But this is what they come up with. Now, to me,
But Synova, did she describe the outfit being the same? Dirty boots, dirty jeans.
his outfit was the dirty white shirt and the coveralls,
Okay.
the jean, the denim coveralls.
Yeah.
So I'm disturbed by this because if you look at this real close, it looks a lot like the guy pictured below. Okay. The nose is the same. You see the wrinkles around his lips. You even see this little dent on, under his eye.
I look at the eyebrows and the eyes, being in the business that I once was, to recognize somebody if they ever wore a mask or try to do something to you. It's always the eyes and the eyebrows you take a look at on somebody to see if you can remember. And that matches.
Look at his bridge of his nose.
Yep.
Okay.
I see it.
This is what I find disturbing about this. They're so desperate to find a killer. I think they drew their killer. You know what I mean? To me,
what was the guy's name? Do we have the guy's name on the bottom?
Yeah, his name is McDuff. Now, McDuff was a killer. He does sound like, he could have been in the area. He was a serial killer and a serial rapist. He's one of those that I get so aggravated. He had killed, they had called him, I believe he was the one that they called the broomstick killer, because he had strangled a woman with a broomstick, and then other things with a broomstick. And then he had been in life in prison. And then it was supposed to be the death penalty. Then it got commuted to life. And then eventually he was paroled. How the heck? I'm just like, why?
Death penalty, he gets life, and then he gets paroled. And
Right.
Which state was this?
He gets paroled, and then he goes and he on a spree, and he ends up
Which
killing
state?
2 or 3
Which
other
state?
people.
Which state paroled him?
I'm looking it up here.
Because I'd like to rewind time and go back into organized crime and move to that state.
Yeah, get back into the biz, man. Get back in the biz.
No. I don't want to get back into it because it's already strikes and you're out. But if we can rewind time, this is the town I want to dream about. They give
Exactly.
him life.
Oh, I'm gonna look
They
him
put him
up.
on death row. They give him life,
Yep.
and he gets paroled.
Mhm, mhm.
It sounds like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
Exactly. I just don't understand. Okay. I'm looking here. Eventually, I gotta say, when it comes to this kind of stuff, Texas and Missouri, we have a saying, and I'm gonna steal it. I'm gonna steal it from a comedian. He says, "If you kill somebody in our state, we're gonna kill you back." Um, it was, I think it was Ron White. He's like, "We will kill you back." Big old Texas boy. But anyways, on November 17th, 1998, he was executed in the state of Missouri for his crimes. But I believe it was.
Wait, so he gets life. Okay, he goes to death row, then winds up pleading out to life. Then he gets paroled, and then he gets arrested again, and gets
He
the chance
killed like 3 more people. Yes. And
after
then
after they gave him the second chance over death row.
yes. And then they find him. They do the America's Most Wanted show on April of 1992, and they show this picture, okay? And somebody in, I believe it's in Kansas City. I'm not sure if it was the Kansas side or the Missouri side of Kansas City. But they were in Kansas City, and she knew the person as, I think, Robert Fowler was his name that he was using right then. And she called it in. She's like, "That guy lives in my apartment building. He always creeped me out, and I think he drove a truck like this, and different things like that." So she called it in, and he happened to be McDuff, Kenneth McDuff. Yeah, he was using the alias as Richard Fowler. Yeah. I'm trying to look to see if I
gotta tell you something, Synova. Use Midwest is boy. Use produce these serial killers like they produce Jordans on a Saturday. I mean, this is crazy.
It is crazy. Well, and it's one of those things that it seems like people want to think the heartland is, of the U.S. is safe and innocent and pure, and they've got the pictures of all the. I'm like, it's bull crap. Come down here. You see, it's chaos.
You know what's funny? Because we were talking about a serious guy in Cosa Nostra that I know personally and you know of. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think he pleaded out to 6 or 8 bodies. But in all actuality, like I was standing in front of social clubs and pizzerias and candy stores and on corners with guys that if they were in the Midwest would be considered serial killers. I mean, I told them standing next to guys that got 8 bodies, 10 bodies. The guy across the street got 4 bodies. Another guy got 3 bodies. So, I mean, like, which is going to be in my book. As you know, it's like I seen my first 2, murdered bodies by the age of 10. I mean, that was something normal for me in my neighborhood. But that was all part of a life. That was a disrespect. That was over a woman. That's over things that went on inside Cosa Nostra and the 5 families, because, I'm from New York, but I was next to guys that you would rate as serial killers at 8 years old, watching these guys walking up and down, but not knowing at the time that these guys had that many bodies. So if you can, there was one crew of guys that hung out together that could have started their own cemetery. You know what I mean? And it's like, now I hear these stories and it bothers me because these guys killed for no reason. Now, I'm not glorifying what these guys did, and they did it to helpless women. Mm-hmm. They would never do it to us. And if you notice, all these serial killers would never do it to go on a string of killing tough guys, boxing.
No, they're cowards because they don't go up against somebody that they have to fight for. They always go up to someone that they perceive as weaker than them.
Cowards. That's a great word for them. And I love to put this out there, because I come from a world where we frown upon that. And even in the jail systems that I was in, if there was men in there that hurt women, they got hurt. And if you go back and you look, the Berkowitzes, look how many serial killers have got killed. They got to put them in protective custody because they get to these jails and they get killed. They killed them. Like me, as soon as David Berkowitz got there, they tried to kill him. You could see the scar on his neck and one, and then they eventually actually kill him. These guys don't stand a chance around legitimate guys, legitimate tough guys.
Right.
And I've been in these places, and these guys get frowned upon. And when they get to serious places, we call it checking in. Checking in is either going to the box or being able to get accepted into protective custody. And guys like that terrified cities like Kansas City and Missouri and Texas, a cowards where I come from. They hide in the box. They hide in protective custody. And and reading this story, it irates me that this poor family cannot get the closure of where the baby ended up and what happened to their 20-year-old daughter.
They have no idea. And that's what's so sad. I mean, this is something that I've always, something that my father said, and I always say, killing somebody is bad enough, but taking them and never having the answers of what happened to them is torturing the ones that love this person for the rest of their lives. You're not just killing somebody, you are torturing everyone that knew them for the rest of their lives, because they don't know what happened to her. They don't know if she's gone somewhere and been forced into human trafficking. They don't know what happened to their granddaughter. This man doesn't know what happened, or grandson. I mean, we didn't know what it was yet. I feel sorry for all of them, but I feel sorry for Rob. I mean, how long, how much therapy would that take as a man to be there? And he said in all of his interviews, I promised to take care of her,
Well,
and
you know
then,
me, I go right to the spouse. We always talk about this.
Yeah.
But reading into this, when you sent me the material earlier, or very earlier on, both families were supportive. Now, usually back then in 1991, families weren't supportive, especially in little towns like that. They were very religious, whatever religion it was that they studied. And you would never see the support like that. So you could see him wanting, you've seen many stories of baby daddies and fathers trying to get rid of the baby, trying to get rid of the baby's mother because they're too young, they can't do it. But with this, you don't see that. They got engaged. Both families were supportive. Both families wanted this new child brought into the world. Both families were going to help and let them finish their schooling. So I got off the boyfriend right away on this case, and I never do. I ride them to the end.
Yeah, that's usually me too. I'm always like,
I ride them to the end. But on this one, there was so much support, which you'd never see, especially in a small town.
Yeah.
Because you know how rumors are. People hate rumors in small towns.
Right. Yeah. So-and-so has got pregnant. Oh my gosh. I moved out of a small town because I hate small towns. And I'm like, God, I lived in one, I graduated from one, and then I thought it was going to be all nice and wonderful when I sent my son to the same school, and the same people figured out who I was and started mistreating my son. I'm like, you don't want me to come to that school.
Listen, when I gave up the life in 2011, I made my plea deal, and I said, when I come home, I'm moving to a one-horse town.
You are
200 miles. There's not even the local sheriff's office. This is what I had said back in 2011. I said, I finally want to go to a one-horse town where a rumor like the mayor's having an affair with his assistant is the biggest thing that's going to happen in that town. And the mayor is also the local grocery clerk. I said this to myself while I was in the box. I say, this is where I'm going. When they let me out, I don't even want to see a public building, a professional building, or a police station for at least 200 miles. I'm going to one-horse town. Somewhere in the
Midwest. Now. I moved out of a town. We bought some land out in the middle of nowhere. For the first year we lived here, we couldn't get internet. We had to get satellite internet.
That's great. That's where I want to go. I want to get
I hate people.
But when you have the life that I lived, and constantly knocking down your door and constantly labeling you and never believing that, you just want to get away and get to one of these small towns that we talk about every week and that we watch on the ID channel and Lifetime or whatever it is that we watch all these cases. That I'm hoping and praying. And you know what? For the people out there, at Hootie282, Brooklyn, Queens at iCloud.com is my email. That is my handle on Instagram. If you have any information on any of these stories that me and Synova Cantrell speak about, you can reach out to me, and it will remain anonymous. It will definitely remain anonymous, and I will try to help these families. We want to close one of these cases. I don't care if you're 77 and you've seen what the guy looked like, or you've seen this guy on any of these cases that we talk about every week. I hope and I pray at Hootie282, Brooklyn, Queens at iCloud.com is my email. Send me information, send me tips. Let me and Synova close one of these cases. We need to help at least one of these families that we talk about every week. Yeah. Please, somebody. There's got to be somebody that has information on these cold cases.
That's true, and this is one of those things. I've been doing this for a while, and I have gotten in some leads on cases, and I've gotten one case all the way up to getting a documentary running about them, and so I mean, making and giving publicity for all these things that we do, that is my my mission, because a lot of these cases get overlooked. After a while they go cold and people stop talking about them, and so that's
And I want
most of
to,
these
I
causes.
want to support you through this whole thing because
Yeah,
I want to close one of these. I mean,
yeah, definitely.
it's like, you know what? I will come to your small town and protect you myself. Like, it irates me when I read these. It's like,
Yeah.
it really does. Big city boy, whatever you want to call me, I'm there. I'll come down to this small one horse town and do whatever I need to do to close one of these cases and give one of these families closure. Because this
Right.
is real cowardness. I mean,
It is, and
yes,
it's
I've
just
known some
devastating.
tragedy in the life. I've known some bad people. I've done podcasts with guys that have over 12 murders. Yes, I have. But this cowardliness that they take women and pregnant women, and it's like, where is the child? Was it a cult? Like, why? And like, it just, it'll keep you up at night. And I'm not a guy who's like, as a child, we didn't have TVs in our room, so we went to bed in the dark. And my
Mhm.
mother and father would say to me, "Don't worry about the dead. Worry about the living.
Exactly.
There's
That
nobody in
don't bother you.
the bed. That's mommy on the other side of the door. And if you ain't asleep in 10 minutes, she's gonna whip your ass, not the ghost." You know what I
Exactly.
mean? Like, that's the way we were raised.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. So, to get back to what we talked about a minute or two ago, there you said something. You used a terminology which I knew what you meant, and I'm assuming anybody that watches my stuff will know what sitting on somebody means. Um, but go ahead and explain that so we can
Yeah.
go into the new information about the case.
Well, that's another thing we talk about. It's one of the things you're bred to be into the life, you learn certain things. One of the things that you learn is sitting on somebody. Now, sitting on somebody is an enemy, or if you get to go on somebody, if you're going to get your button in the life, like where I come from, or straight disrespect, or somebody tried to harm your family, sitting on somebody is doing recon work, as it would be called in the army. And in the real world, it would be watching somebody, blending in with the crowd, blending in at the grocery store, seeing the van around, following you home, learning your pattern, what time you go home, when you're away from others, when you're going to be alone, when you're not going to be alone. Where do you go on Tuesdays? Where do you go on Wednesdays? That's sitting on somebody. And in the life that I came from, that's a very big deal, especially on important people. You have to sit on somebody. Now, thank God, a lot of the times in the life that I come from, a lot of people use that term to rob them: drug dealers, bookmakers, Shylocks, and organized crime. And a lot of times it's sitting on a guy that's a high ranking member and he's hard to get, and you got to learn his pattern. And a lot of people are creature of habit.
Oh
So
yeah.
a woman like her, he sat on her for a month. He knows where she went on Monday at 2:00. He knows that she'd be alone on a Wednesday. He knows that this particular night she's driving around alone for some reason. This is the night we can grab her. That's sitting on somebody.
Now, the reason why I find that interesting that you said that is because we have gotten some information. They said that they released a letter. And again, I'll just show it. When I edit this, you can't see it off my phone. When I edit this, I always blend in the pictures, but I'll just read it to you. They have taken, this is a letter that came into the police department. They don't say the specific date, but they say back at the beginning of this ordeal. So we're talking back in the 90s. They had cut and pasted letters out of newspapers and magazines, and it says, "Hello, no," and then something that they've blacked out. "We know who you are, no," and then blacked out. "People like you deserve what you get. We know where your foxy daughter is at. She will see us soon. Tell blank she has our deepest sympathy." They misspelled deepest. "For your loss, goodbye." Okay, so they have redacted some of it before
Okay.
they released it to the public. Now, what they're saying, they hadn't released that yet. And about a year or so ago, they got an anonymous phone call from somebody, a tipster, that referenced this letter that hadn't been publicly released. Okay. and they informed this person that took the call that they took the wrong Angie, that the Angie they were supposed to take was connected. Her father was connected to a huge drug deal running through rural Missouri at the time, and that he was supposed to be a witness in a trial. Now, to me, someone calls with that, that shouldn't be that difficult to figure out. What's the biggest drug deal running through the area in 1991? Who was their witness list, and which one has a daughter named Angie? Okay, but for some reason that information they have had for 18 months to 2 years. We still haven't had an arrest. So what do you think about that? Do you think that's a viable thing, or do you think that's somebody spoofing the police? I have one question of that. If this person was sitting on Angie for a month, how did he not know that she's the wrong one?
Correct, because they watched her coming back and forth from parents' house, from college, doctor's appointments, however long they were sitting on her, I don't know. Yeah. My question before I'm going to answer that is, who wrote that letter?
Right. We
the
don't
letter that you just read.
don't know.
Anonymously?
To the police.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
It was sent anonymously.
The guy was so dumb he couldn't spell deepest correctly.
No, he spelled it completely different. It's DEE and then pest. I'm wondering if it was maybe he was just cutting things out and he's seen those two words because they are different. Right. So they look like they came from different pages of different things. So maybe he's just put DEE and pest. But I still find it weird that he couldn't have cut out the individual letters and spelled it correctly.
So now, what my thoughts on that after hearing that is that the Angie that was pregnant, the police, this is my look, collateral damage. The drug bust was bigger. Their witness is bigger. The guys that they were going to put away with this witness is much and more important than Angie and her child at 20 years old. And that's just the way it goes. The government works like that. Special forces, meaning like organized crime unit, anti-crime, CCIB. These are all special units in New York City, and other big cities have them as well. And it's for the word they like to use, the phrase, the better good, the bigger picture.
Greater good.
And this is why something like that, if that right away, they might have known that a year in. We don't know in 91 what type of investigation was going on through the Midwest drug connection, and could have been a huge trial going on back then. Or it could have been a DEA bust where it didn't happen yet. But back then those were small towns and they got tips. We're in trouble and so disappeared. Where's his family? He must be the guy that's giving them the information. Guys are getting picked off left and right. Our guy in Kansas City, our guy in Detroit, our guy in Chicago, wherever this pipeline went. And then when they find out about this innocent girl being picked up and that it could have been the wrong one, you know what? Let them think they got the right one, because if our witness thinks that his daughter's in harm, he's not going to cooperate with us. So it's for the...
Why do you think it would still be
better good
years later?
Well, now it's just they can't. The family could sue for millions of dollars. They can't admit
it's a scandal, so they couldn't admit it.
They can't admit to a mess up. They can't admit that they knew about this the whole time, 30 years later. Now, my question is, which I couldn't read. Did they ever, which not that I couldn't read, that it wasn't in the paperwork that we had. Was she ever declared missing indefinite, or which I've never heard that phrase before, or was she considered dead? Did they ever give her a death certificate? Did the family ever have a funeral for her and the child? Was it left at?
Yeah, it's left as missing persons.
That's it, just the missing persons.
Yeah, no, yeah. It's from what I could find. I've never found her been declared legally dead.
It's something bigger now. Listening to that,
you know, see, that bothers me, because I feel like that bothers me. Because I feel like there's another case I will be sending you in a few weeks, because you and I've got a big case we're going to be talking about soon. Yes. But there's a case that I'm still waiting. I'm fighting. I wouldn't say fighting. I am very passive aggressively being aggravated. I don't know how to say this nicely. I am working with a small rural police department not too far from me, who has, I think, officially completely lost their marbles, and they have okay, I can't get into the case too much. I'm trying to get a copy of the plea agreement that was given to the man that killed the lady, that got off with a 5-year sentence because he said he was going to tell him where the body was, and he didn't, but he still got the plea agreement. And I'm trying to find the details of the plea agreement.
And they kept the plea agreement?
Yeah.
Let him do 5 years and he never told them where the body was?
Oh, he told them where it was, but it wasn't there.
And,
So there's a lead into one of the cases that we're going to talk about soon. But I'm trying to find, I talked to Sydney, and Sydney's like, well, you know, of course he says a lot of things that I'm not going to repeat, but he has some very colorful language when he gets angry. But he said, he's like, you've got to get a copy of this plea agreement. I need to read it. He said, because he said the only recourse this poor mother has at this point is to get a copy of that plea agreement, tear it apart, find a technicality, and then take this man to civil court. That's the only.
because the only thing that can happen is that if he made a deal that the body's been there for so long because of the ground, maybe water, maybe there's a dam close by, it disappeared. No prosecution in the country would ever give a deal that you're going to take it. Then how many murderers would get deals? Oh, I'll take you to get the body.
He's got, that's the thing. This happened within a few years. He took him right where he said he put her. You could tell there's never been anybody there. The guy runs his dogs on this area.
About that.
Yes. And so, so anyways, you and I are going to talk about that case, but I'm waiting very impatiently to try to get a copy of this. And he's trying to charge us like $115 to get a copy because it's going to take that long to print everything and ship it to me. And I'm like, that's BS. And so we've got to, when I get that plea agreement, you and I are going to talk about that case.
Oh,
but it's one of those deals where I think it falls right in the same line. This guy was an informant.
I'd love to read that kind of plea agreement because then we're going to go out and get it for everybody.
Mm-hmm. I think it falls in the same line, in the same category as what you just said. I think he was an informant, and they valued their informant over this woman's daughter, is what it was. And I'm like, they've got to have some kind of, I realize, for the better good and all this jazz.
She was the sacrificial lamb. Angie.
Yeah.
Angie Hammond was a now it's the picture's looking a lot more clearer. She was a sacrificial lamb.
That's what it looks like. And then
if we have the time, Synova, and we could pull up drug cases in that area during that time within a year to 18 months, maybe we could put some pieces together.
Maybe. I'll dig into that, see what we can find out, because I really feel like, I don't know if it's true. Because the thing I go back to as well is, if this guy was watching her for that long, how did he get the wrong one? You know, so if it's true, it makes sense that they just didn't say anything. But I still go back to, what kind of idiot doesn't know who he's been stalking for a month?
You know, from being a professional, if he was a professional guy, first of all, he wouldn't have looked like that. He wouldn't have dressed like that. He wouldn't have had a van like that. And he would have had a file, meaning an address and a picture.
I don't think he was professional at all.
Right. So if he was sitting on her and it was professional, you get an address and you get a picture. In that kind of situation where you're going against a witness's family, somebody's going to get you minimum picture, address. And then you get the right Angie. So.
Right. So to me, it's just odd. It's odd. So okay, so this is our case for the week. Her name was is Angie Hammond, because we'll be positive. Maybe she's still out there. She's 4'11", weighs 120, 140 pounds at the time of her disappearance. She's got brown hair, brown eyes, and like we said, she was 4 months pregnant when she disappeared. So she would be approximately 50 now. Her child would be approximately 30. And if you have any information on this case, you can contact Hootie or myself. We will keep it, anonymous if you're concerned with that. And we will pass it on. We will give the information to the right people, so maybe something will get done. Or you can call the Clinton Police Department in Clinton, Missouri, and give them your information. But we would love for whoever called and gave information about that anonymous letter. The police have made a plea, please call back. And they said they would keep your identity a secret, and that they would protect you in any means necessary. But I look at it as Angie's mother and Angie's would have been mother-in-law. They were expecting their first grandbaby. I mean, how many grandmas are out there watching this thinking, what would happen if this happened to me? And then I think of poor Rob. How did that affect him for all these
Do
years?
we know where he is all these years? Do we know?
He finally he spent, I don't know, many years doing interviews trying to get
He
somebody
never
to
made
help.
it to the army.
And then nothing ever happened. And then
Yeah,
he
did he
did
ever make
finally
it to
move.
Did he ever
Huh?
make it to the armed forces?
I believe so, yeah. But then he eventually did get married and moved out of state. But it took him a long time.
Wow.
And I think from this, just from a psychological standpoint, I how did that affect him as a man? To just be, I made this promise to protect her, and then she was right there. And so
Pulled away from him, literally.
yeah, and then knowing that
It's
his
hard to
car
live
just, what is she thinking if she's looking back through that window at me and she sees me stop coming? You
Right.
know,
He's
you
like,
know,
my fiance's right there. He's gonna
yeah,
save me.
yeah,
Never
So I
happened.
just look at all that, and so I always plead to my viewers, these aren't stories. These are human beings. These are real people that suffer to this day. So if you have information, do the right thing and call in. So
Yeah,
thank you, Hootie.
listen, if you don't want to speak to the police, I'm an ex-street guy. Synova's chasing crime like nobody else. And you can call us up, like I told you, at Hootie282, DM me, email me, brooklynqueens@icloud.com. Reach out to one of us if you don't feel like reaching out to law enforcement. Give us something on this case. I mean, could you imagine watching your loved one being ripped away right in front of you, and you're thinking that you're being able to get her, and she disappears? And I would also like to dedicate this episode, even though we didn't get a positive outcome. Me and Synova lost somebody this week that was very close to us. She was closer in friendship with this man. I was working with him on a project, my first book, which me and Synova is going to finish together now. Dennis Griffin, aka Denny. He was a veteran. He was an ex-law enforcement. He was a wonderful writer, wonderful father, wonderful husband, a great man, grandfather, if I'm not mistaken. In a short time I got to spend with him, I got to learn a little bit more than I knew about writing and putting a book together. And I just want to say, rest in peace, sleep in peace, my good friend. And we hope that you're up there with the best of them.
Yeah.
And
He was a very big victims advocate too. That's how I met him, was because we're both victims advocates. We really work hard to be very respectful for the victims. We don't go out and, I'm a true crime writer, but if you read my stuff, I don't really go in depth to the gory details, because I know this person's mother is reading what I'm writing, and she may not need to know what happened exactly, and so that's the way I approach things, and that's how I met him. He was a victims advocate, and he ran the Transparency Project, and that's how I met him, and he helped a lot of people with his victims advocacy program.
Definitely be missed. One of the greats we missed.
All right, well guys, we'll see you next time.
Thanks again. Stay down.